Hello and welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be reading you a story called The Mad Slasher from the book 25 Horrific Serial Killer Cases, Canadian Monsters. If I do pronounce anything wrong, I do apologize. On the bitterly cold night of March 1st, 1974, Judith Barsky left a pizza restaurant in Strathroy, Ontario. Clutching her pizza box, the 19-year-old bent her head into the biting wind and headed for home. Desperate to be out of the cold, she decided to take a shortcut over some railroad tracks. Unbeknownst to Judith, someone had spotted her leaving the restaurant and was now following her, keeping pace at a distance so as not to attract attention. When she reached the darkness of the rail tracks, he quickly closed the gap, coming up behind her, grabbing her by the hair, and throwing her to the cold, hard ground. Judith barely had time to comprehend what was happening when she felt the sharp end of a knife slice into her throat. Instinctively brought her hands up to protect the wound, the warm rush of blood quickly soaking through her woolen gloves. Her attacker, meanwhile, was ripping at her jeans, pulling them down her thighs, entering her with rough fingers. As her life ebbed away, he fondled her, satisfying his carnal lust before robbing the young girl of the change in her pockets. Eventually, he walked away, leaving the body where it lay. Judith Barsky was found the next morning, lying on the ground in a pool of congealed blood. A hunt was immediately launched for her killer, but with no clues, the investigation quickly stalled. 15 months passed. Then in June 1975, another young woman was attacked. 18-year-old Rosalie Walters was walking in Alexandria Park, Toronto, when a young man with lank, dark hair approached her. Before she could react, he grabbed her by the throat and told her he was going to rape her. Although terrified, Rosalie decided to cooperate, if only to save her life. However, when the man had difficulty undoing the zipper of her jeans, he became angry, squeezing harder and harder until she blacked out. Rosalie came to with her jeans and panties pulled down to her knees. She had searing pain in her throat and soreness in her genitals, but she was alive. The next victim would not be so lucky. On October 20th, 1975, 19-year-old Louise Jenner answered a knock on the door of her Mount Briggs home. Standing on the porch was Christian Magee, a friend of Louise and her husband. Louise gladly let him in, but she'd no sooner closed the door than Christian grabbed her by her hair, threw her to the ground, and began tearing at her clothes. He then began raping her, but inexplicably stopped after just a few seconds, allowing Louise to scramble free. She made a break for the back door, but Magee caught up to her in the kitchen, looped a bootlace around her neck, and began tightening it. When Louise finally passed out and slumped to the floor, he produced a jackknife and hacked through her throat. Louise Jenner's body was found later that day by her husband. Her baby daughter was asleep upstairs unharmed. Investigators immediately suspected that Louise Jenner must have known her killer. There was no sign of forced entry to the home, and neighbors reported a cream-colored Oldsmobile parked in the drive. They also told a young, dark-haired man who had been spotted in the Jenner's drive. The description, as it turned out, matched one of the Jenner's friends, Christian Magee. Coincidentally, he also drove a cream-colored Oldsmobile. Magee was therefore brought in for questioning, but denied being at the Jenner residence or having anything to do with the murder. With no concrete evidence linking him to the crime, the police were forced to let him go. You might have thought after this close call with the authorities, Magee would have laid low for a while, but he didn't. Less than 2 weeks later, on November 3rd, he picked up 19-year-old hitchhiker Sylvia Jennings. Sylvia was driven to an isolated spot near Mount Briggs, where Magee ordered her to remove her clothes. When she refused, he throttled her into unconsciousness, then struck her several times on the head with a soda bottle, fracturing her skull. Sylvia woke lying beside a road covered in blood and lucky to be alive. On June 15th, the following year, Magee picked out an even younger victim. Like Sylvia Jennings, 15-year-old Susan Scholes was hitchhiking when Magee offered her a ride. But unlike Sylvia, she would not survive the attack. Susan was raped and strangled, her throat slashed, and her genitals mutilated. Her body was found the following day beside a road near the town of Forest. This time, however, the police had a solid lead. Susan had been seen getting into a Ford pickup branded with the logo of a local butchery. The vehicle was used to pick up animal carcasses from farms in the area. Questioning the owner of the business, the police heard a familiar name. The employee who had been driving the truck that day was none other than Christian Magee. Magee was again brought in for questioning. Under interrogation, he admitted picking up Susan Scholes. However, he insisted that he'd let her off safely a few miles down the road. Unfortunately for Magee, the evidence did not support his story. Traces of Susan's blood were found in the truck. A flaying knife belonging to the business was also missing. Christian Magee stood trial for the murder of Susan Scholes in July 1977. He was found not guilty by reason of insanity and sent to the Oak Ridge Maximum Security Mental Facility, Penetanguishene. There he remained for the next 29 years until 2006, when he made a bid to be transferred to the Toronto Center for the Treatment of Addiction and Mental Health, a low-security facility which allowed his patients regular weekend passes. Despite warnings regarding the high probability of Magee reoffending, the Ontario Review Board initially approved the move. However, Magee's joy was short-lived, as the Ontario Court of Appeal overruled the board's decision. To the relief of a fearful public, the mad slasher was ordered to remain at Oak Ridge indefinitely. Thank you for listening. If you like this type of content, please consider subscribing and liking my channel, and I will see you on the next one.